Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Elise Adler, Director of Events for Parnassus Books, and we are so delighted to share tonight's event featuring fabulous author Rebecca Ross. She's here to celebrate her new book, A River Enchanted. Now, remember that you can buy signed copies of A River Enchanted from Parnassus Books. And if you order them tonight, she will also personalize them for you. So we're going to go ahead and put the link to place your orders in the Facebook comments and also in the description of YouTube. So Rebecca has also agreed to take audience questions. So you can place those in the Facebook comments or in the YouTube chat. And she will do her very best to answer those questions throughout the course of the evening. So we are extra excited because tonight Rebecca is in conversation with fellow fabulous author Hannah Whitten. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Rebecca and Hannah.
Hi.
Hi, Hannah.
How are you?
I'm good. So I guess first of all, I should address the fact that I am sitting in a bathroom. And it's because I am in Nashville. And I'm in a hotel room, and I was thinking, like, where's the best lighting so people can see me, because I couldn't fit my ring light into my suitcase. And so I was like, you know what, the bathroom will do. So I apologize for the bathroom behind me.
You somehow managed to still look stunning, even like in hotel bathroom lighting. So you're doing great. You're doing great. Okay, so first of all, obviously I loved A River Enchanted. And I'm so excited to be here with you to talk about it. And so I was going to start with some of my questions that I have for you, and we can just talk about those. If you guys have questions for Becca or for either one of us that you want both of us to answer, if you just want to put them in the chat, we will get to them. But I'm going to do my questions first because I want to hear your answers.
Okay.
So my first one. So this is your adult debut. Before this, you had a bunch of really amazing, successful YA books. So I was curious about kind of how/if your process differed whenever you were writing adult versus YA, and kind of how you made the decision that you knew you wanted A River Enchanted to be in the adult space instead of the YA space, and just how you navigated doing that.
Yeah, so this is like the question of the hour.
Yeah.
A lot of people are curious, like, why is this book adult, or what makes this book adult? And it's funny because I did not set out wanting to write an adult novel. I actually was trying to write my next young adult, and this was in 2018. I debuted with The Queen's Rising.
Mm-hmm.
I had just drafted Sisters of Sword and Song, and I was like, I'm gonna take a few months off. And so 1 month turned into 2 and into 3 and then the 4, and I had the worst writer's block I really ever experienced. It was so frustrating, and I'm thinking, man, am I 3 books and done? And then it was at the beginning of 2019, I kept a brainstorming journal. So every day I was just write something down, even if I'm staring at a page and I'm unable to write anything on my laptop. If I'm just write ideas down, eventually something is going to spark. And so it was really odd with this book. The setting came to me first. So with all of my YAs, I saw character first. And it's very much here's the character, and then I built the world around them. With this book, I saw the Isle. So it's this very mountainous, misty place, very reminiscent to the Isle of Skye. And I was like, what is this place? And who are the people who live here? And the first characters I saw were actually Torin and Sidra. And they're in their mid-20s. They have a marriage of convenience, and they're raising a daughter, and they have 2 very different ideologies. So I saw their conflict very early on, and I was very intrigued by them. But I thought, okay, so this is YA, so obviously these aren't my main protagonists. Maybe they'll be more secondary, supporting role characters. And so then I found Adara next, and I still felt like I was missing somebody. And then literally the next day I found Jack. I was like, okay, yes, Jack, this is my protagonist. And in the beginning he was 18, so I was thinking an upper YA. And so I start writing the book, and I'm sending it chapter by chapter to my critique partner, Isabel Ibanez. And she makes it to Sidra's chapter, and she's because originally there were more chapters of Jack on the mainland that I ended up cutting to quicken the pace. So she makes it to Sidra's chapter, and she sends me a text, and she's like, is this YA or adult? And I was like, YA, maybe. So I already knew, like if she had to ask me that she was picking up on vibes that I honestly like wasn't even aware of, that that maybe this book wasn't young adult. And so I was just like, you know what, I can't think about this right now. So I'm just gonna write the book, and then when it's time to revise it, I'll figure it out. So when I was done, I literally felt like I had this 50-50 split where Jack and Adara felt YA. And I was comfortable with that. It's what I knew. But then Torn and Cinder were definitely adult. Like they had these adult themes, and even just like with my storytelling, like the tone and the atmosphere is very different in this book than my young adults. And it was of course much longer. So I was just like, I sent it to my agent and I was like, I don't know what this is and I don't know what to do with it. Like, and so she read it. She was like, yeah, I kind of understand. Like it could really go either way. But at the end of the day, I was like, I just feel like I just need to be brave and revise it as an adult novel and kind of elevate Jack and Adara as best as I could to take them from YA to adult, even though there is still some crossover with their arc. And then take it on submission on the adult side of the market. It was like super scary because I was like, this book might not sell. But thankfully it did. And it has been, I felt like it honestly was just like this very seamless transition, like it was always meant to be. But it definitely took me a few rounds of revisions to kind of get the book where it needed to be.
Yeah. That's really cool. Like I'm always very impressed by people who manage to do both and have very distinct ways that they do it, because like they're both obviously, like you can tell it's like a Rebecca Ross book, but like there is just a distinct shift between the YA and the adult that I find very impressive. So good job.
Thank you.
That kind of I had another question kind of about the role of the landscape that you kind of answered already. Just because the landscape in River Enchanted is described so vividly, and it's such a huge part of the plot itself, because the way the Isle is divided is like what drives the plot essentially. So my question was, is that kind of something that you start with generally, or is it something that kind of comes along in revision? And it sounds like with River Enchanted, it's what you started with, but generally speaking, you said you kind of start with character. So is setting something you kind of have to layer in as you go along?
It is, like the setting's very much typically very secondary. And I feel like, because I don't know about you, but I'm a discovery writer. So I discover so much of the book as I'm going. So a lot of times I really I can't figure out magic systems until like I'm like on the second round of revisions, really trying to tweak things. So it was interesting because with this book, when I saw the Isle, like I knew right away that like the wind was carrying gossip, and like the roads were the only thing that didn't move, and like the landscape could shift. And I don't even know where that came from. It just kind of like sprang to mind. And I was like, I'm so intrigued by this. But typically, yeah, it takes me, again, because it's like I can draft really quickly, but I think that means I spend a lot of work and revisions trying to figure out like how all the pieces are supposed to fit together. Yeah. And I will say, like, this book was like, at some point, like in revisions, I was like, I think I might have bitten off more than I can chew, because there's just so many points of view, and there's just a lot going on. There's the mystery, there's the tension with the two clans, there's a romance. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But I will say, like, this book made me grow as a writer. Like I had to grow along with it in my craft.
Yeah. Something that I thought was really interesting is like, so you have like the fairies and the spirits that are part of the lore of the book, but also like Cadence itself felt very much like fairy because of like the shifting landscape and things like that. And I thought that was cool that how they dovetailed, I guess. I thought was really interesting. I have them written down. We're going analog over here. So this is a two-parter question. So Jack is a musician. And the way that you write about how he feels about his music and like the way that he goes about it was just very visceral. It made me wonder if you are also a musician at all, like if you play anything or sing or any of that.
I wish I could sing. I'm horrible at singing. Like, it's so embarrassing. I wish though. I did play the cello in high school for like 3 years. And honestly, it's one of my biggest regrets that I didn't keep going with it. So I feel like in high school, I was a little bit like, yeah, I like it. But I remember like I wasn't practicing every day like I was supposed to be. And I had a few like of these little competitions, and I would get like so nervous, like, oh my gosh, like, but I just love the way the cello sounds. And like, sometimes I think, man, I wish I had kept going with it, but I didn't. But, so I do have a little bit of musical background.
Yeah. Okay. Cello, I love the way the cello sounds. It's so beautiful. I can't play anything. Like, my parents tried so hard. I was like in violin and piano and just none of it stuck. I was very, very bad at it. So I just did choir forever. My second question that goes off that one is kind of the role of music in your process. I know a lot of people, myself included, are very big on like making playlists and like having songs that you listen to over and over again while you're working on a certain book or a certain part of a book. Is that something that you do? Like, is it a big part of your process at all?
It is definitely. I feel like there are songs I listen to like on repeat. It's almost kind of embarrassing because like if you're on Spotify, like your end of the year playlist, it's like always the songs that you're like listening to when you're writing, and it like skews.
And sometimes it's like weird ones, like film scores or like the sound of an airplane landing, like weird stuff that you like listen to while you're writing to help focus.
Yes, it's so weird. So I do listen to like mainly like soundtracks and classical music when I'm writing. Occasionally I'll throw in like maybe a song that has lyrics in it. For the most part, it's soundtracks. So there were definitely some songs that like I listened to on repeat, and I like curated this like huge playlist for the book, and it's on my Spotify if you're curious. But and of course it has some like Braveheart, some Outlander, because you have to have that, gets you in the mood. So I always recommend like for readers, if you like music that are connected to books, you could go and listen to it before you read, or even while you're reading or after you're reading, and it kind of gives you that full like feeling, I guess, that I guess only music can do. Yeah.
See, I can't listen to anything with lyrics while I'm writing. So I have long and intricate playlists that I listen to while I'm doing everything else, like driving or cleaning my house or working out or whatever. But while I'm writing, I'm like, I need silence, or I need something that's just like noise.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's interesting. A few of my songs that I have on the playlist, I found this one band called Skippinish, and they do sing in English, but they also sing in Gaelic. So listening to something being sung in a different language sometimes is also kind of neat, because you're hearing a voice, but you don't really know what they're saying.
Yeah.
So it still kind of gives you like, I don't know, just an interesting change up from all like the soundtrack scores and stuff.
Yeah, I've done that before with the book that I'm working on right now is kind of like French inspired, and there's this French metal band called Alceste, and so all of their stuff is in French, and I don't speak French, so I can listen to that while I'm writing, and it doesn't like interrupt me. But anytime I've tried to listen to anything with lyrics, I cannot. Like, my brain just will not compute multiple words coming in from multiple directions.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm very similar.
Give me some of your greatest hits from the River Enchanted playlist. Like, if you were going to do like a 3-song playlist of like, here is River Enchanted, what would it be?
Okay, there's a lot. Let me think. So I love the King Arthur I think it's Legend of the Sword. It has is it
the Tom Hardy one?
I don't think it's Tom Hardy. I think it's Charlie. Is it Charlie Hunnam?
That one, the other blonde guy.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I get all confused.
I was like, is there one with Tom Hardy? I didn't even know that.
I would watch it if there were. Everyone text no.
So, and that's like a really, because they have like this very like rock sound to that sound.
Yeah.
It's kind of like very different, but there is one of the songs is like The Lady in the Lake that I love. I listen to that one on repeat a lot. And of course the band Skippinish I was mentioning, they have a song that they sing in Gaelic. I have no idea what they're saying, but it's absolutely just like, I like listened to it on repeat for like months just because I couldn't stop listening. And it's called Mali Dawn. I'm probably slaughtering the pronunciation of that. But I highly recommend going checking that out. And then let me think. I also, I really loved Wind and Rain by the Outlander soundtrack. I think that's like a really beautiful song.
Yeah, I think I know that one actually.
And I can kind of just picture like Jack almost like seeing the Isle for the first time to that song.
Yeah. I love it whenever you can map like a moment in a song directly onto like a moment in the book, and it helps you just, that's so much fun. It's so fun whenever you find something like that.
Yes.
My I'm sure my husband will know that song. My husband is obsessed with Outlander.
Oh, really? I love that.
I shamefully, like, I read all the books. Well, I say all of them.
You've read all of them?
Well, I say that. I haven't read like all of them. I think I dropped off around like book 4 or 5.
Yeah, I did the same. I read the first 3 and loved them, and then I kind of got a little stuck in number 4.
Yeah.
But I want to finish reading it someday.
They're so dense.
They are.
I did not have the time. And so I watched the first couple seasons of the TV show, and then I did the same thing where I kind of dropped off, but he like religiously watches it, which is very funny.
I love that.
He's very into it. Okay, let's talk about romance tropes, because we got a couple different ones going on in here. Okay, so like I said before, Torrin and Sidra, obviously I loved Jack and Adira, but Torrin and Sidra were just they got me real good in the heart place. And I loved the idea that you had of like, and you kind of hint back at it, like Torrin's first wife, the mother of his daughter, it was very much this like swashbuckling, adventurous, like love story that, you know, tragically ends. And then he marries Sidra, and it's very quiet, and it's very much like for the purpose of kind of like going forward. And it was strange and really wonderful, because you don't see that a whole lot. Like most stories end with the big swashbuckling romance. And so the idea of like, okay, how do you go on whenever that ends prematurely? I really loved the way that you explored that a lot. There's not really a question there. It's just me gushing at you, but I loved it very, very much. They were so good. So you got Marriage of Convenience going on there. And then like Adira and Jack has kind of got a little bit of everything, because like I was thinking about it first and I was like, oh, it's friends to lovers, but then it's like, not really, because it's like childhood enemies to kind of friends, kind of enemies to lovers. And it was just so layered and great. And I was curious about which kind of romance tropes are your favorites to write and your favorites to read, and kind of what you found the most rewarding about exploring both of those very different romantic plots in A River Enchanted.
Yeah, so yeah, Jack and Adira, it's hard to describe them, because sometimes I say enemies to lovers, but that's not quite fully how you.
Yeah.
So but I love enemies to lovers. Like that's like probably, I will never get sick of that. Reading or writing, like I could just do it all day long. So I wanted to sprinkle a little of that in Jack and Adira, because I just couldn't resist. And I love this idea of like these people having history, even if they were kids. And then, you know, how much you change in 10 years, and like meeting each other again, and like, what is that going to be like? And of course the sexual tension is kind of there from like the beginning, but they don't quite know what to do with it, you know? But yeah, with Torrin and Sidra, I think, again, like they appear to me like so vividly, like right off the bat. And I myself am very drawn to more, in a sense, like I love the enemies to lovers and the big, like, you know, but also these quiet stories, because I feel like they resonate more with me, because I feel like I'm very much a quiet, reserved type of person. And like I sometimes, like in high school, I was like totally a wallflower, like often overlooked, like had my book and, you know, writing my book, you know, writing stories. And I just wasn't like this, you know, I wasn't at the forefront ever. And so I feel like Torrin and Adira are both very larger than life characters, and I loved writing them. But I also like how Jack and Sidra are almost more, they are not that they're forced, but they have to be more in a supporting role. And I think like I love them so much for that, and how they both are a little bit more quieter characters. But yeah,
they both seem like more comfortable in those supporting roles too. Like it's not like they're being kind of pushed in that direction. That's where they want to be.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I loved both of them. I thought all of those. Do you read romance, like genre romance?
I do, and it's funny. Like I really have not started reading it until a few years ago. When Isabel Ibanez and I became friends, she's like, I need to give you a list of romance books. And I was like, oh, thank you. Because like, I didn't know where to start, you know?
It can be very overwhelming just because there's so much.
Yes.
And like all the subgenres There's a lot happening there.
I know. And I will say though, like, I am just so impressed with romance books. Like, I feel like people think, oh, that's so easy to write. But I think it's honestly probably one of the hardest things to write.
Yeah.
I've read some that I still think about them and like the character arcs and like, how do you pack all of that in one story? And usually they move pretty quickly because like,
they're
you
like
start reading one and you can't put it down.
Yeah, they're like 300 pages. And I'm like, how? There's so much.
Yes. So I will say I'm somewhat like in the past 5 years. And I think especially during the pandemic, like I just really wanted to just read romance, like things that just felt happy that I knew were going to have like a good ending.
Yeah, that's what I think a lot of people have turned to reading kind of genre romance within the pandemic and stuff, just because it's very comforting to start a story and know you're going to have a happy ending.
Yes.
Like, and that's what I've needed here recently. And like I do like reading roundups and stuff on Instagram, and people be like, well, how do you read so much? I'm like, well, most of it is genre romance. I read it very quickly because I need the serotonin. So okay, talking about like genres that you read and stuff, this is only like kind of related, but related enough that I wanted to like hear your opinions on it. Fairy books. Do you read them? Who do you read? What was your kind of intro? And also historical fantasy, because like River Enchanted is secondary world fantasy, but it's like grounded enough in things that feel historical that it just has that vibe. And like I feel like whenever I was reading it, I kept thinking of it as a historical fantasy, even though it wasn't technically. So I was curious about other books that you've read in that genre, if there was any that was kind of a gateway to you wanting to write something that felt like that.
Yeah. So I'll say, like, I grew up as a teen. I read like all the Dear America diaries.
Yes.
I love them so much, and I think that really got me into like the historical fiction with those Dear Americas. But I also read Lord of the Rings when I was a teen, and I was like obsessed with Lord of the Rings. Like I read The Fellowship like right before the movie came out, and I went and saw the movie in theaters like 7 times. Like I was like,
we watch them every weekend. I got a tattoo in Elvish on my leg this week. So
did you?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love
very
that.
into Lord of the Rings.
Which I love all of your tattoos anyway.
Oh, thank you. No impulse control.
So I feel like honestly, I'm trying to think if there was a fairy book that I read. And I feel like I came into it kind of late, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to rack my brain.
Mine was like, the first one that I read was Tithe by Holly Black, which was kind of my like seminal fantasy book just in general. Like that's the book I remember reading and being like, I want to do this. And here I am writing secondary world fantasy, and I've never tried a contemporary fantasy. I have high hopes, but none of my tries have ever panned out very well, but maybe someday. But one that I kept thinking of whenever I was reading A River Enchanted, and I cannot remember the name of the author, but it was called The Summer King, and it was like a fairy book that was very like Irish fairy lore and like set in Ireland, like a contemporary fantasy. And River Enchanted felt very similar to that to me. So
I feel like I've heard that title. That's not a Patricia A. McKillop or Patricia McKillop?
It's not a Patricia McKillop, but it was very similar in vibe. It was, man, I should have looked this up before I started talking about it. That would have been a smart thing for me to do. It was called The Summer King, and it was great. Okay. And it gave me a very similar vibe. So that would be, all of you who love River Enchanted, read The Summer King.
I'm gonna go check that one out. But I just thought of Juliet Marillier too. I remember the first time I read Daughter of the Forest, I was so deeply moved by that book. And I feel like, when did I read that? It was like maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, like the first time I
read it in high school, and I need to revisit it because I think about it all the time, but I literally read it whenever I was a junior in high school, and so like I don't remember anything about
I remember just like crying so hard in that book, and it was just so like, good. Oh my gosh, like my husband and I went out to dinner after I finished reading it, and I was like trying to like I needed to talk about it.
You have to like pull yourself out of book brain and into real world brain. I do that to my husband all the time where I'm like, I know that we have come out here to like talk about our real lives, but instead I'm going to completely recap this book to you that I just read and I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I did the same thing to him and I just like started crying when I was like at the end and he's just like, oh gosh, like
glad you enjoyed it.
It's like it was really good.
You had a good time. Juliette Marlier's stuff is just all of it. Chef's kiss.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
I love her stuff.
What else did I have in here? So you talked about being a discovery writer. So do you do any sort of planning at all, or is it very much like you just kind of jump into the first draft and you see where it takes you?
I do a lot of jumping in. I will say, like, looking back over a lot of my process, like when I reach the third act, I typically have to get a piece of paper out and then I start being like, okay, what's happening in this chapter? What's happening in this chapter? Just because, especially with A River Enchanted, there were so many threads that I was wrapping up and I have multiple points of view. I just need to figure out like, who is the best person to have like be telling this chapter? Like what needs to happen in this chapter? Yeah. So typically like the whole first and second act is just like pure discovery and it's amazing. And I typically know like where I'm heading. I just don't know how I'm gonna get there. But then the third act is like, okay, I need a little bit more structure if I'm just not gonna go like, you know, chaotic everywhere. But what about you?
I used to be very much more of a discovery writer, I think, than I am now. And now I tend to plan more, but like chaotically. Like I will kind of outline. I always try to at least have my ending in mind. And especially like the books that I have been working on, like the Wilderwood books are a duology, the books I'm working on now are part of a trilogy. So it has kind of been necessary to at least know like where I want everything to end up ultimately, just so I can make sure I'm like pointing to it correctly.
Yeah.
But I tend to outline and then kind of throw the outline out. Like, I use it just enough to understand kind of how I need to get to where I'm going, but then once I'm actually like in drafting and in revising, if I go in a different direction, I just kind of let it ride. But every book is different with that too. I feel like the book that Foxglove King, the book that I'm working on now, I planned out much more meticulously than I planned out for The Throne, the second book in the Wilderwood series. Like that one, I didn't really know exactly how I wanted it to end until I kind of jumped in and started like really getting in Neve's head and drafting and figuring out how her story was going to look. And that kind of helped me shape the way that I wanted everything to wrap up. So, and I don't know which one is better and which one like stresses me out more, because they stress me out in different ways. But
yeah, I will say, if you're, because like it is my dream or my goal one day to sell a trilogy, but I'm like, I'm probably gonna have to plan that.
It's so intimidating.
Yeah. Like, so I was like curious, like how it's been for you, like having a trilogy, like really having to plan things out. And
yeah, and I mean, I plan things out loosely. Like I have a very vague idea of what I want like the very end of the third book to be, but the way that we're getting there is still kind of vague. Like, I feel like whenever I start at the beginning of writing something, I have like a few scenes that are very solid in my brain that I know I want to happen. And so it's just kind of like tracing a path from where I'm at to those scenes and figuring out how I'm gonna get there along the way.
Sounds like that's like super similar to me too. Like everything you're saying is like, yeah, that's how I work too. But I feel like when you leave that room, it's like you're leaving room for the magic to happen. Because sometimes I'm just amazed that like it's like subconsciously I'll do something that I didn't realize like I needed to do. I just did it and like, oh, I'm glad I did this, because now I can do this, you know.
Oh yeah, I have done the same. I feel like if I plan too rigidly, then I'm not like leaving room to figure out cool stuff. Because there's a lot of things that I have done that end up being things that I like hinge entire like theses of the book on that I didn't necessarily intend. It just kind of happened. And then you look back on it and you're like, oh, subconscious, thank you. I can figure that out now. So do you plan on writing more adult in the future?
I do. I don't know what that is yet, but I feel like now it's almost like my world's been blown open. So I'm like, okay, so whenever I have a new idea, I'm gonna have to figure out like, is this young?
Oh God, yeah. An extra layer of planning.
Yes, but I do hope to keep writing. So haven't been able to let myself kind of simmer or tinker with new ideas. Like I want to so bad, but I have like a lot of revisions, and then I'm about to start writing the sequel to my next YA, which is coming out next year. So I have like a few things I have to do first, but I'm like, like what is the next story going to be? I'm not sure yet, but
I'm amazed that you're like holding all of that in your brain at one time. I'm holding one book in my brain right now, and I feel like my brain might pop open. So
well, it's funny you mentioned like when you were signing books and how someone's like, hey, will you put the favorite quote from the book in there? And you're like, your brain's already two books ahead.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like what is it?
Man, nothing will mess with your sense of just time in general, like publishing. Where it's like, what day is it? What year is it? I don't know. My brain is operating 2 years ahead.
Yeah.
It's like after revised Foxglove King, then I need to start drafting the second book in the series that won't come out until like 2024. And it's just
it's wild to think about.
What's happening? Oh, yes. What was your last 5-star read?
So I actually just read Forest Fall by Lyndall Clipstone, and I loved it. So I obviously loved her debut, like very lush gothic fantasy that just like sweeps you away. And her writing is just absolutely gorgeous. And so even like with Forest Fall, I'm like, okay, like I literally want to like underline every single sentence. This is not fair, Lyndall. But I was like, there was a point in that book, I was like, I have no idea where the story's going. I'm terrified for all the characters, and I just love that. Like, I have no idea what's gonna happen, but
yes,
I love that book.
Amazing. Mine. I recently read Vespertine by Margaret Anderson.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So it was a suggestion. My agent suggested that I read it after she read the first draft of Foxglove King, because it was very like Frenchy, kind of like Catholic Church inspired. And she's like, have you read this one yet? Because they're very similar and I think that you would enjoy it. And I was like, I have not, but I do own it, which is my constant refrain, because I love to buy books and then I love to look at them on my shelf, but when do I have time to read them? So I read that and it was amazing. I read it in like 3 days. And I love Margaret's writing. Like, it's just very engaging, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, you just immediately feel very at home whenever you read any of her books. She has a really seamless way of getting you into the world, even whenever the world is really complicated. So I really loved that one.
I haven't read that one yet, but I remember, so I kind of like a story with An Enchantment of Ravens, which was her debut.
I loved Ravens.
Yes. So I remember it was like maybe 2 or 3 months before my debut, The Queen's Rising, was coming out. And I saw like this terrible review about it. And it was like my first time. You're like a debut author and that happens. Like the first time it's really jarring and you're trying to like figure out your emotions. Like, how do I feel about this? Or what am I supposed to feel about this? And then it got me feeling so down. I was just like, literally just like in this like hit of despair for like a month. And I was just like, I didn't feel like writing anymore. I was almost like, am I strong enough to put stories out for mass consumption? Because there are going to be people that don't like what you do.
Yeah.
But during that time, I read Enchantment of Ravens, and it literally was like just putting on like this warm sweater on, cozy, and I was like, it's going to be okay. And I want to keep doing this. So I just always see that book just like pulling me out of that like despair and being like, yes, you're doing this because you have to do it.
Her books feel like that. Like even the ones that have like darker stuff, like something just about the way that she is able to write feels, it's very comforting. Another question that came in is, you have a lot of books under your belt. So what's your best advice for new or aspiring authors?
is to finish your manuscript. I feel like I did not really understand like how much time was going to be involved with writing a book, how to pull all the threads together, how to structure like emotional arcs of characters, how to wrap something up until I actually made it to the end, or even knowing how to begin a book. Like I feel like once you've written the ending, you know how to go back and write.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So I learned so much just by marking off time, and I was working this 8 to 5 job at the time. And I had this moment where I was just doing 8 to 5, 8 to 5, 8 to 5, and I wasn't writing and I wasn't reading. And I had this moment where I was like, okay, like I'm letting time slip away. And one day I'm going to look back and realize I never wrote anything. And it's going to make me really sad. I'm going to regret it. So when that happened to me, I was like, I'm going to write in the evenings. I'm going to write on the weekends. Like whenever I'm not at work, like I'm just going to do it. And so I did, and I finished this fantasy novel. It was super cliche and horrible, but it gave me the confidence, like, okay, I can do this. Like I can actually write a full-length novel, and just kind of learn as I went. And it was funny because like maybe 2 months later is when I had the idea for the Queen's Rising. And because I had just like gone through the process of writing a fantasy book, like I was ready to write the Queen's Rising. And that was the book that kind of changed everything for me. So I feel like just being very like diligent with your time and protective of your time. And you're definitely going to have people who are like, you know, might not think you can do it, or like you should be doing other things. But just stick with it and get to the end. Because once you have a manuscript, then you can work with that and you can move towards publication with something like that.
Yeah, I feel like even if you, like the first book that I ever wrote, I finished it and then was like, well, that's terrible, but I finished it. And kind of whenever you like rip the Band-Aid off of just realizing that, yes, you can start at the beginning and you can write through to the end and you can finish a fully formed thought in book form. And once you realize that you were capable of doing that, it becomes easier each time. Like, and as you move forward, if like you're a new author that's just debuting and you move forward in the publication process, like there's always new challenges with every book, just because every stage of the journey has got new stuff going on. But if you just keep the confidence and knowing that like you wrote one once, you can do it again, or you revised a book once, you can do it again. Like you know how to do it, even if you don't feel like in the moment you do.
Yeah. And I know sometimes I still have moments where it's like, I don't even know how many books I've read at this point. And I'm like how do I write a book again? Like you still have that moment where it's like, you kind of have to like settle in and figure out what the story wants from you. And and even like I think some people think, oh, if I write something, spend all this time writing it, and it never goes anywhere, is it a waste? And like no writing's ever wasted. And there could even be like a spark of idea in that manuscript that you pull and you use elsewhere. Because I've done that too. Like, oh well, that didn't work out, but I'm going to take these ideas and rework them.
Yeah, I had a shelved book that I wrote while Wolf was on submission that I still think of very fondly, but was just fundamentally broken and I didn't know how to fix it. But I stole a lot of pieces of it for Throne, and I have taken more pieces of it and like reworked them into the Nightshade trilogy that I'm working on now. So just save everything. Like no piece of writing is ever wasted, even if it's just to like look back on and marvel at how far you've come. Like you can use it for something. Another question was so we talked about the biggest difference in kind of writing YA and adult. What's been the biggest difference in the publishing experience between YA and adult?
So for the most part, like the editorial process is very much the same. You go through your 3 rounds of edits with your editor. You have your copy editor. You have a team of people behind you. I will say that I've had with this book, my publicist and my marketing director, and like they've been very hands-on, and it's just been really exciting to have like a lot of support from them. Like my publicist has been like pitched me to all types of like things. And so I was like doing a bunch of podcast recordings leading up to pub, which I had never done before. So just like a lot of fun, unique opportunities have come with this book. And I think it is because my team was like, yes, let's do everything we can to, to get this book out there. Mm-hmm. So, but for the most part, it hasn't felt too terribly different.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That's all the questions I have for you.
All right.
And I think we've covered all the ones that have come in. I love your book, and I'm really thankful that I got to read it and blurb it, and very excited for the sequel. This is your gentle reminder to have someone send it to my home so that I can read it whenever it is done. Yeah.
No, thank you. I am like so excited for the Throne. Like I cannot wait. I remember like when I picked up For the Wolf, like within like that first page, I was like, yep, this book was written for me, you know, and it's so nice to find books like that.
Yeah, I love that feeling.
Yeah, it's like, man, like I just loved it so much, and I am excited for your trilogy. So this is your little reminder that, you know, like you can always send me.
Oh, absolutely. I'll send you. I should have Throne arcs soonish. Somebody tagged me. Someone else has received them because someone tagged me in a picture of it today, and I was like, I would also like.
Isn't that funny how that happens? Like they're getting tagged, or people have like gotten the arc, or even like a finished hardback, and you have that.
Like, can I have one, please? So once I get one, I will definitely send one your way. Once they arrive at my home, I'm excited to see it all together.
Oh, that's gonna be so exciting.
Yeah. So it's bittersweet just because it is like closing out the duology. So I haven't like been emotional about it yet, like really, but I feel it coming. Like,
yeah,
I feel it in the water. I smell it in the earth, that whole shtick.
Sometimes it did, like, I feel like when does it really hit you? Like that the book's like, it's happened and it's out there. And I feel like, of course, seeing it like in hardback for the first time, but also like going to a bookstore and seeing it in the bookstore.
Yeah.
But it's weird, like how like the range of emotions that kind of like come with it, and especially wrapping up a duology for sure.
Yeah. And it's strange too, because like by the time like publication day kind of feels like the finish line, but it's really like when it starts for everybody else. And so then you've lived in that world for so long and like worked on it, and now it's kind of you're working on new things, but seeing other people experience it and like tag you and stuff, it's weird, but it's a good weird, because like anytime I get tagged in like Wolf stuff, because Wolf feels so far like behind me now, but I still get tagged in stuff where people like just read it.
Yeah, they're just discovering it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool. It's rewarding and fun.
Yeah.
And this was also rewarding and fun.
Well, I'm so excited, and I'm just so thankful that I got to do this event with you. And I know we have not officially met, but it's so nice to just talk to you, even if it's through a screen.
Yes, and hopefully someday soon we can do one in person.
Yeah, it will happen. I know this is one day I'm going to be at Parnassus for an event. It's just
absolutely. I will be there, and then we can go to the Cheesecake Factory after.
Yes, I love it.
We were robbed of Cheesecake Factory, but it happens to us all.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody who came in. You can order signed copies of A River Enchanted from Parnassus. The link is somewhere that should be easy to find. And if you order them tonight, then Rebecca can also personalize them for you. And you should do that. Yeah. And I hope you all have a great night. And Rebecca, I hope you have a great night as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Hannah and Parnassus.
Bye.
Bye.